The year is 905 AD. The stage, a land fractured by ambition and betrayal. Italy. For centuries, the legacy of Charlemagne, the mighty Carolingian Empire, had dwindled, its power fragmented, its glory a fading memory. But some still clung to the dream of a united empire, a dream that would lead one man, a king, to a fate more terrible than death itself. This is the story of Louis III, a king with a grand title, Holy Roman Emperor, but a kingdom constantly slipping through his grasp, and of Berengar I, his rival, a man equally determined who would forge his own destiny in the crucible of Italian politics, even if it meant extinguishing the light from another's eyes. To understand Louis's tragic end, we must first understand the world he inherited. After Charlemagne's death in 814, his vast empire, a beacon of order in the early Middle Ages, began to unravel. His grandsons and their sons squabbled over territory, weakening the very foundations of their power. By the late 9th and early 10th centuries, the once mighty Holy Roman Empire was a title often bestowed, rarely truly held. The real power lay with regional strongmen, dukes and marquises, each vying for supremacy. And nowhere was this struggle more intense than in Italy. Italy, with its strategic position, its ancient cities, and its spiritual heart in Rome, was a prize everyone coveted. It was a land of immense wealth, but also constant instability. And into this tumultuous arena stepped Louis III, King of Provence. Louis III, grandson of Louis II, who was himself a Holy Roman Emperor, saw himself as the rightful heir to the Carolingian legacy. He had a strong claim, a noble lineage, and crucially, a desire to restore past glories. But Italy was not an empty throne. For years, various powerful figures had vied for control, and one man, Berengar, Margrave of Friuli, had emerged as a dominant force. He had even been crowned King of Italy in 888. Berengar was a shrewd and capable leader, but his rule was never entirely secure. Italian nobles, ever opportunistic, would frequently look for alternatives, especially if they felt their own power threatened. And so, in 900 AD, a group of disaffected nobles, along with Pope Benedict IV, extended an invitation to Louis III. "Come," they seemed to say, "come and claim your rightful inheritance. Come and bring order to our troubled land." Louis, eager to assert his imperial ambitions, accepted. His first Italian campaign was a success. He defeated Berengar's forces, entered Pavia, and was even crowned Holy Roman Emperor by Pope Benedict IV in February 901. For a brief moment, it seemed the Carolingian star might indeed be rising again. But the imperial crown was a heavy burden, and the loyalty of Italian nobles a fleeting commodity. Berengar, though defeated, was not broken. He retreated, regrouped, and, as history so often shows, waited for his moment. The very nobles who had invited Louis now began to waver. Perhaps Louis was too strong, too centralized in his rule. Perhaps they preferred the familiar, if challenging, presence of Berengar. Betrayal in this era was less a moral failing and more a political strategy. Louis, for his part, made a crucial mistake. He underestimated Berengar's resilience and the fluidity of Italian loyalties. He tried to consolidate his power, but the ground beneath his feet was shifting. By 902, Berengar had gathered enough support to launch a counter-offensive. Louis, finding himself isolated and his support dwindling, was forced to flee. He was eventually captured, but in a display of surprising magnanimity, or perhaps calculated strategy, Berengar released him, extracting a promise that Louis would never return to Italy. It was a promise Louis, fueled by ambition and perhaps a touch of hubris, had no intention of keeping. 5 years later, in 905 AD, the lure of Italy proved irresistible once more. Driven by renewed appeals from a faction of Italian nobles, the very same type of invitation that had led to his earlier downfall, Louis decided to try again. This time, the stakes were even higher. Louis had broken his oath to Berengar, a grave offense in an age where oaths, though often broken, still carried weight. Berengar, now fully established as King of Italy, was not only prepared but furious. Louis entered Italy with a sizable force. Initially, things seemed to go well. He captured several important cities, including Verona, where Berengar was based. For a moment, it seemed history was repeating itself, but with a different outcome. But this was no repeat of 901. Berengar was playing a far more cunning game. He feigned retreat, allowing Louis to advance, to overextend his lines, and to settle into what seemed like a comfortable victory. Louis, perhaps lulled into a false sense of security, made a fateful error. He allowed his guard to drop, and Berengar, like a predator, was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment came in the dead of night. Berengar, having secretly gathered his forces, launched a surprise attack on Verona. Louis and his men, caught completely off guard, were overwhelmed. The fighting was brutal and swift. Louis's forces, disoriented and outnumbered, quickly collapsed. The king himself, trapped and exposed, was captured. Berengar had his rival, his oath-breaking opponent, at his mercy. And this time, there would be no magnanimity. This time, the punishment would be absolute, a horrific warning to any who dared challenge his authority in Italy. The custom of blinding a defeated rival was a brutal but not uncommon practice in the early Middle Ages. It was a way to permanently disable a threat, to prevent them from ever leading armies or claiming thrones again, while still preserving their life, at least physically. On July 21st, 905 AD, by order of King Berengar I, Louis III, the Holy Roman Emperor, was subjected to this horrific ordeal. His eyes were put out. The light, and with it, his imperial ambitions, were extinguished forever. He was then sent back to Provence, a king without sight, a ghost of his former self, a living testament to the ruthless politics of medieval Italy. Louis III, now known as Louis the Blind, lived for another 20 years, ruling Provence in name only. His power utterly diminished. His dream of restoring Carolingian glory, a dream that had led him to Italy twice, ended in darkness. Berengar I, on the other hand, solidified his position as King of Italy. He would face other challenges, other rivals, but the blinding of Louis III cemented his authority in a way that mere military victory could not. It was a chilling declaration. Italy is mine. Berengar himself would eventually meet a violent end. Assassinated in 924. Such was the volatile nature of power in this fragmented age, but his reign, marked by both strategic brilliance and shocking cruelty, left an undeniable mark on Italian history. The story of Louis III and Berengar I is a stark reminder of the brutal realities of power in the early Middle Ages. It was an era when titles meant little without strength, where alliances were fluid, and where ambition could lead to both incredible heights and unimaginable depths of suffering. The blinding of Louis III wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was a symbolic moment in the long decline of the Carolingian Empire. It demonstrated that the idea of a unified Roman Empire, even a holy Roman Empire, was largely an illusion. The future of Europe lay in the rise of distinct national monarchies, rather than a centralized, overarching empire. It also highlights the unique and often brutal nature of Italian politics in this period. Italy, constantly contested by external powers and internal factions, remained a battleground for centuries, a prize that often brought more trouble than triumph. And finally, it serves as a powerful, cautionary tale about the perils of ambition without sufficient foresight and the cost of underestimating a determined rival. Louis III, blinded by the promise of a restored empire, ultimately lost his sight, his power, and his dream. The story of the blind king, Louis III, resonates across the centuries, a testament to human ambition, political ruthlessness, and the unforgiving nature of medieval power. So many stories, so little time. Until our next deep dive into the history of anything and everything. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, make sure to like this video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more historical deep dives. And we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below, letting us know what piece of history you'd like us to explore next.